Hi, my name is Melva McCahan, and I'm a paralegal technology student here at Fayetteville Technical Community College. Today I'll be doing a persuasive speech on should institutions that profited from slavery provide reparations. By the end of my speech, my audience will be able to understand that by providing reparations from institutions that profited from slavery is a vital step towards creating a more equitable and just future for all Americans. Since the United States economic domination was primarily established on the backs of enslaved people, the organizations that profited from these exploitations are required to make amends to close the racial divide and advance true equality. They made us into machines, and now they run on the fuel that we gave them. What if your family's generational wealth was erased before it ever began because your ancestors was treated as property? What if the very institutions that denied them freedom now boast billion-dollar endowments? Wouldn't you want justice? Now, picture yourself as a descendant of those who were slaves, still dealing with the fallout as those same organizations prosper without any accountability. This is not a lesson in history. It is a reality of the modern era. Numerous American organizations, including large banks, insurance corporations, and Ivy League universities, benefited greatly from slavery. Slavery was not just a Southern institution. It was a national source of money for over 250 years. Northern banks provided funding for slave plantations. Ivy League universities used enslaved labor and took contributions from slaveholders. Insurance companies wrote policies on slaves as property. Because of slavery, these groups not only survived but thrived, with endowments worth billions of dollars, and several of these same institutions are now globally renowned. Meanwhile, the descendants of enslaved people continue to face systemic barriers to wealth, education, and opportunity. The legacy of slavery endured after independence and still shapes our culture today. For this reason, I'm adamant that organizations that benefited from slavery must pay reparations, not only to acknowledge their history, but to actively address the harm that still exists today. We'll start by examining the ways in which slavery directly benefited institutions. Second, I'll discuss how racial inequality is still shaped by the legacy of past exploitation. Lastly, I will discuss what meaningful reparations might include and why they are not feasible, but also essential. First, I'll explain why reparations are necessary today. Slavery directly benefited institutions by using enslaved individuals as collateral. Several influential organizations such as banks, insurance companies, and universities were able to build their foundation on the profits of slavery. Thousands of young enslaved men and women, the offspring of stolen ancestors legally treated as property, were transported from Maryland and Virginia hundreds of miles south and forced to undergo retraining to become America's most productive workers in order to grow the cotton that would feed global industrialization and provide clothing for the world. Some planters became so wealthy from the holdings of slaves that the Mississippi River Valley had more millionaires per capita than any other area at the start of the Civil War. Slavery was brutal to the enslaved people. Children were snatched away from their moms' bosoms and sold off to faraway plantations. Here I have a list of institutions and corporations and universities that profited from slavery: J.P. Morgan Chase, Georgetown University, and Aetna. In his book, The Color of Law, Richard Rothstein meticulously details how government policies at all levels created and sustained segregated neighborhoods throughout the 20th century. Cotton is a highly versatile and profitable used in a wide variety of products Beyond clothing, profitable items include clothing, bed linens, towels, and industrial textiles, as well as byproducts like cotton, seed oil, and even materials for paper and currency. The global demand for cotton and its diverse application ensures its continued profitability across various sectors. Now that I've established why institutions that profited from slavery should provide reparations to descendants of enslaved people, the legacy of slavery still shapes racial inequality. Racial inequality is still shaped by the legacy of slavery. The median wealth of a white household is almost 10 times that of a black household. The generational loss of wealth and opportunity brought about by slavery and the discriminatory actions that followed is one factor contributing to the racial divide. What reparations might entail and their importance. Reparations are a reasonable, workable remedy. Compensation is fair and workable option. It's obvious today that America has defaulted on its promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring the sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. In closing, we all should now be able to see how reparations would close the wealth gap and for America to replace that bounced check with the cashier's check to ADOSs, which are American descendants of slaves. In conclusion, the need for America's institutions to pay its debts to enslaved people is a must. Apologies alone are not enough. The nightmares of slavery continue today for descendants of enslaved people. It continues in the unfair practices and redlining of systemic racism today. They made us into machines, and now they run on the fuel we gave them. Since the United States economic domination was primarily established on the backs of enslaved people, the organizations that profited from this exploitation are required to make amends to close the racial divide and advance true equality. The Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act is an act of Congress in the United States. It was first introduced in 1989 by Representative John Conyers. The act was to address the fundamental injustices, cruelty and brutality and inhumanity of slavery in the United States and the 13 American colonies between 1619 and 1865. Some will argue that the past is not our responsibility. However, actions regarding it are our responsibility. Some will argue that no one living is responsible for righting the wrongs of their long dead ancestors. And I will say to that, you are benefiting from the wealth gap, disparity in wealth across races. Black households own a lesser share of wealth than white families. The underlying source for inequities in healthcare, housing, and education is historical injustice. Slavery-advantaged institutions still reap the benefits of their heritage today. These disparities are reinforced rather than addressed in the absence of restitution. Organizations that benefited from slavery deserve more than just recognition. They must take action. The idea of reparations is not radical. They are required by morality. The slavery that flourished in the United States constituted an immoral and inhumane deprivation of Africans' life, liberty, African citizenship rights, and cultural heritage, and denied them the fruits of their own labor.